Good morning. I like the last line of that song where it says, "Then I will tell of your salvation, I'll tell all men." And that actually really works well into the lesson I want to talk about this morning. I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've noticed it just seems like culturally and just with the little circle of people I'm around, it just seems like there's a lot of interest in spiritual things recently. It seems like there's just a lot of people who are looking right now, and I think it's because of a variety of things. I think there are a lot of challenges going on in this world right now, but in the midst of all of those, I think we're really seeing that we need God, and I think this is really an opportunity for us to be sharing that gospel with people around us. And so here in a few weeks, we're going to have our Evangelism Work Day, where we as a church are going to go out into the community and try to evangelize this neighborhood here a little bit. And this year, we'll talk about it a little bit more next week, but this year, the way we're going to be doing it is focusing on personal Bible studies, inviting people to have Bible studies with people here. And those could be Bible studies on a variety of topics, but rather than just inviting people to come worship with us, inviting people to just sit down and open the Bible and just one-on-one or in little small groups just study. And our hope and prayer is that through that we can help each other. We can all help each other to grow, but we can help other people outside of these walls to grow as well, to grow to know Christ and to grow to follow him. And so our whole focus for the year has been on spiritual growth. Our focus has been on always increasing. And there's a lot of different ways that we can increase, and we've talked about that throughout the year. But one of the crucial ways that we need to increase, that we don't want to leave this part out, one of the crucial ways is increasing in our ability to share that gospel message with others. And so next week, we're going to have a sign-up sheet where you can sign up if you want to volunteer to teach a personal Bible study. So get together with someone from this community and lead a study. And basically, it's just going to be they pick a topic or you pick a topic or a passage or something, and you sit down and you just read and you talk about it and you just grow together. I think a lot of people here have done that already, and I think a lot of people haven't done it yet, but if you haven't, I hope you'll consider it. I hope you'll consider that maybe that could be something you could grow towards. So I think some of the challenges when we think about how do I do that, if you haven't done it a lot or haven't done it ever, some of the challenges are, well, what would I even talk about? I don't know. What would I even share from the Bible that would even help someone else? Well, I think most of the people here, most of us, have studied the Bible quite a bit. And if you have studied it quite a bit, there are things you do know. And we don't know everything, but there's at least something that you know that you could share with somebody else. But a lot of times I think it's just a challenge of, well, like I do know some different things, but what could I share that would actually be of benefit to someone else? And that's what I want to talk about this morning. We've had a lot of lessons about the basics of becoming a Christian. How do you become a Christian? And so I decided not to preach on that this morning because I think most of us are pretty familiar with those passages about what do you do to become a Christian and what did Jesus do for us and salvation and all of that. But I think one of the challenges is with a Bible study, when you're studying with someone one-on-one or in a small group, that's not the only thing you're going to study about. You're not just going to study about how to become a Christian. That's a great thing to study about, and we should study about that. But really, we got to study about like what comes after that and what the Christian life looks like and how to live for Christ and what this is all really about. And so that's what I want to talk about this morning is what does a Christian's life look like? And I think thinking about this portrait that's sketched out for us in the New Testament is going to both help us live it out more, but also help us think through, okay, how can I share that with somebody else? Just to get those thoughts organized well enough in my mind that I can take that and I can go to those passages and I can sit down with someone and we can understand this together. So this is going to be a back to the basics kind of a sermon. Just get back to it. Here's the basics of what it means to live a Christian life. But I want to do that so that we can all get back to where we need to be on this, and so we can think through, okay, here's what I can do. This is a passage I can share with someone. This is another passage I can share with someone. And just really think through how am I going to teach people. We're going to be doing it from Romans chapter 12. So turn your Bibles to Romans 12 where our scripture reading was. That's where we're going to be this morning. We're just going to work through that passage that Perry read for us and think through what's the picture that Paul is painting for us in this passage. Because I think it's a great, just basics kind of chapter for here's what a Christian looks like. So, Romans chapter 12, and we're going to start in verse 1 and think through this. So, Romans 12:1. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. So, first thing, when you're thinking about what do I need to share with someone, what does it all start with? Well, Paul starts here with, I appeal to you by the mercies of God. So the first thing he wants them to think about is, this clicker, it works most of the time, and then it doesn't. All right, to see God's mercy. See the mercy that God has shown towards us. Paul spends a lot of time in Romans talking about this. We're here in chapter 12 at this point, but really throughout the book of Romans, he's talked about look at what God has done for us. It's not until you get much later in Romans, like 12, where he really talks about what we need to do for God. I mean, he does it earlier as well, but he doesn't really start focusing on it until you get to the later sections. But throughout the book, he talks about look at what God's done for us. He talks about our sin. He talks about Jesus' sacrifice. He talks about God's forgiveness. He hits that a lot early on in the book of Romans. And in fact, if you look at the context here, if you look at just the previous chapter, the last few verses of chapter 11, let's jump to Romans 11:33. It says, "Oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable are his judgments and how inscrutable his ways. For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been his counselor, or who has given him a gift that he might be repaid? For from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be glory forever and ever. Amen." So the context of this is this great moment of praise. He's just been talking about the salvation that we have from God, and then he just bursts out in praise. And he says, everything comes from him. Everything is through him. Everything is to him. It's all about God. And I like a lot of the phrases he has here. Like verse 34, he says, who has known the mind of the Lord? So it's like God's mind is so beyond anything we could ever even imagine. We can't even come close to the kind of knowledge that God has. He's just trying to say, like, you can't question God. It's just God's knowledge is so far superior to us as these small little created beings. And he says, who has been God's counselor? Nobody gives God advice. Who did God ask advice for? No one. He has all wisdom. And then in verse 35, you have this gift thing about who's given him a gift that he could be repaid. What could you ever give to God to thank him for what he does? Well, you could give him something, but would it really repay him? I mean, how would you ever repay him for everything? So the first thing Paul wants us to think about is look at how great God is. Look at how merciful he's been to us. Now, I think I've numbered these. We're going to look at 5 different things in this passage. And when I think about these 5 steps, and I describe them as steps, when I think about these 5 things, I think if we have a challenge with any of them, number 2, number 3, number 4, all the ones that we're going to list out, any of the rest of living a Christian life, it's going to probably point us back to a problem that we have with the first one. This first one, I think, is the key to everything else he says in the passage. If I don't understand just how much God loves me, it's going to be very hard to serve him as I should. I can force myself to serve him. It's not going to work very well. This is going to be the fuel that is going to fuel all the rest of the Christian life. I've got to see this. I've got to appreciate his blessings and really see what he's done for me. And through that, to both see just blessings, like we sing that song of Count Your Many Blessings, and just see all those blessings, but then not just the blessings of, well, he's given me a car, a house, some money, but way beyond that, even like Paul does here, the blessing of salvation, seeing what he's done for me on the cross. So that's where we need to start. And that's something that I think it's just one of those things where we all know, but we don't know it deeply enough to motivate us towards the rest of this passage. So how do you help someone with this? I think this one, when you're sitting down and you're having a Bible study with someone, this is easy to skip past, because a lot of times if someone's kind of religious already, we think, oh, well, they already know this. Like, they already know that Jesus died for them. Yeah, that's kind of basic. Like, they've already known that. There might be some other issues where we got kind of goofed up, but we've already got this one down. So let's skip past that and let's just talk about, okay, here's how you become a Christian. Are the things, these 6 different things you do after you're a Christian, and let's just talk about that. And what we're missing is this is the fuel. If I'm not doing the rest of the things right, it's very likely that I don't appreciate this one enough. And so I don't think this is worth just skipping past when you're talking to someone. I think it's something that we need to be bringing out from the scriptures as deeply as we possibly can. So how do we do that? If you're going to study with someone, how do I share this with someone else? I mean, we could study Romans 12 together. That would be good. But there might be other passages we could go to that would hit this a lot more deeply. And I can think of lots of passages. You can too. So let me put some passages up here, and then maybe you'll think of some more too. But what would you sit down and read with someone to help them think about all that God's done for us? So you could start back in, talk about creation, talk about the fact that God created everything. Think about the implications of that, okay, if God is the one who spoke everything into existence, then every single thing I have is because of God. I can't claim anything as my own. The very body I live in is because of God. The very air that I breathe is because of God. Everything that gives me any pleasure on this earth is only because God created it. So if I can start with that helps me just start thinking in terms of, okay, it's really all about God. It really is. And then maybe we could branch out from there. Maybe you could study things like, if you really want to think about the mercy of God, there's a lot of passages that bring that out so vividly. Perhaps the most so would be actually studying the crucifixion, thinking about Jesus' death for me, thinking about all that he went through because of my sin, because of what I've done. Now, in order to really appreciate that, we've also got to really think through the depth of sin. If I don't realize just how great my sin is, then I'm not really going to appreciate the fact that he forgave me of that sin. And so really, all of this hangs on me understanding the gospel. And so all of this goes back to understanding what the gospel is, that message of I have sinned and how much I don't deserve that forgiveness, and yet he was willing to extend that forgiveness to me. So all those passages we can go to all over the Bible that would help explain the gospel. And with that, I think about many of Jesus' parables, like the prodigal son. I think this really helps you see the mercy of God. It helps us see that I am that son who wandered from God and squandered everything that he had. And if he created everything and gave me everything, and then I just went off and I wasted it, and then I come back to him, and then rather than him being angry, he embraces me. And that's because of Jesus at the crucifixion. So those kinds of things, those kinds of passages, I think really help bring this out. Or if you want to go a lot deeper with it, so many of Paul's writings, like the first half of Ephesians, really brings out, look at what God's done. Just really shows just really brings out God's grace a lot. So those are some ideas, but those are just ideas. What I hope is that there's probably passages for you that you're thinking, oh yeah, I know this is a passage that really inspires me towards God's grace. We're losing our slides here. Let's see. There we go. This is a passage that really pushes me towards God's grace. It's inspired me in the past. And I think what helps so much when you're studying with someone is pick something that's meaningful for you. What has helped you really see God's mercy in the past? What has helped you count your blessings? And then share that with somebody. Okay, so that's the first one. That's going to be the fuel. So here we are. We've seen God's mercy. Where does Paul build from that? He says in chapter 12, verse 1, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. So give yourself as a sacrifice. Present yourself as this spiritual sacrifice. The first one was seeing what God's done. The second one is my response to God. What could I do in response to God? If someone does something for you, what do you do to say thank you? I think most of us have had that kind of experience where somebody does something really nice for us and we have to sit there and think, all right, what can I do for them? Like, just like someone takes you out to eat. Well, what you often say then is, I'll have to take you out to eat sometime. If they did that for me, I'm going to return the favor. And we think in those kinds of terms. If someone does a favor for me, I think through, what could I do for them? But have you ever had someone in your life who's just done so much for you that when you really think about what could I do to thank them, it's hard. And you kind of realize you're always on the receiving end of that. Maybe there's someone who's just really impacted you deeply in your life, like a parent or a grandparent or a close friend, someone who you think about, I would not be where I am today if it had not been for what so-and-so did for me. The way they helped me when I was in need, maybe emotionally or physically, or the way they've guided me in my life, or whatever it is. And you think, what could I do to say thank you? And it really, after a while, you feel like, I could say thank you. I just feel like there's nothing I could possibly do that would really show the gratitude like it should. And that's really, I think, where we are with God. That if you understand the depth of how much He did for me, then it's hard to even think through what could I give to Him in return. And that's where we think in terms of, well, there's worship. You could worship Him. And we think about worship throughout the Bible. A lot of times, like in the Old Testament, the way they would worship is that they would take some animal and they would kill it and they would burn it on an altar and they would sacrifice it to God. And of course, we don't worship that way today. But you think about that, it was a sacrifice. It was something they gave up. That they had an animal that they had to raise, and it was expensive and took time and everything, and then they just killed it and gave it all to God. So that would be quite a gift to God. But even then, it's like it's a gift, but it's such a small gift in comparison to what God's given. So what could you give to God that would be bigger? And that's the challenge. Like, what could you possibly give? Well, I could give Him my money. Well, how much of my money? Well, I could give this much or that much. I guess I could give Him all my money, but then what would I do? Like, how do you even, what could I do to really say thank you? And what this passage says, EC says, present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Sacrifice not an animal, sacrifice yourself. Give yourself to God. And really, that makes sense. Once we see that there's nothing we could really do for God, we realize, okay, the best I can do is just everything. That I give Him my all. every little last bit of me. That's what the Christian life looks like. It really is. And I think this is so easy to miss. You can tell we're missing it when we ask questions like, okay, now, how often does he want me to come to church? Or when we ask questions like, how much do you think is the right amount for me to give? Like, how much money? I know, like, you read in the Old Testament, they had those tithes where they gave 10%. So do you think we should do, like, more or less or the same? Or, like, all of those kinds of things. Or, like, there's these sins I'm committing. Is it okay if I just do it, like, a little bit? Like, is God okay with that? That it's not like a lot of sin, it's just a little bit of sin. Like, all of those things, it's just thinking in completely the wrong terms. What he's saying is, if you see what God has given, then you'll just give him your life. Give him everything. And the way he describes this, he says, as a living sacrifice. So it doesn't mean that I actually die for him, although it could involve that. It means every day of my life is living for him. That all the decisions I make are for him, thinking through what can I do to please him. And that's going to involve worship. It's going to involve my money. It's going to involve my talents and my abilities and all of that. It's all going to be wrapped up into, I want to just do everything I possibly can to serve him. And really, you see this in Jesus' teaching when he talks about whoever would come after me must take up his cross and follow me. It's a strange passage. Why does he say that? What does he mean? He means this. He means give up yourself for him. Just be that living sacrifice. Now, we might look at that and be like, that seems like a lot to ask for. If I feel that way, and it's so easy to feel that way, if I ever feel that way, it's because I didn't get number one right. It's because I don't really see the mercies of God. If I see the mercies of God, if I see that God came and in the flesh and drove nails through his hand for me, if I really see that, then number two is obvious. It makes sense. It's still hard, but it makes sense. Of course that's what I would do. Of course I would be crucified for him. Now, how do I see this, and how do I help others to see this? What passages could we go to talk about that? So many. I mean, the Bible just points in this direction all through it, but here's just different things that came to my mind. Teachings of Jesus. Just study through the Gospels. This is where Jesus was trying to get people to. And so you read the Sermon on the Mount. You read all of all the passages where he's talking to his disciples and all the parables that he tells. Everything is trying to lead us towards just be that living sacrifice for me. I like the book of Philippians. I love the way that Paul lives this out. You really see this in Paul's life. And when Paul describes that in books like Philippians or many of his other letters, you feel that. You feel that kind of emotion. You see, okay, yeah, that's what it means. When he says, to me, to live is Christ and to die is gain. That's him saying, I'm just going to give up everything for Jesus. Or I think about Hebrews 11 is a neat one. It takes us back to the Old Testament, taking us to all those great heroes of faith who had so much trust in God that they would do just anything for him. Just read some of the Old Testament read about some of the Old Testament characters, Moses or Abraham, or so many people who went through so much for God, and thinking about why would they do that? That was the last one. So just thinking about those passages, thinking about these different ones, we could add so much more to the list of just visualizing what does it look like to be a living sacrifice. Again, it's all based off of going back to number one. All right, so then once Paul said that, now he's going to flesh it out a little bit more. How do I be a living sacrifice? And so in the next verse, in verse 2, he says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. All right, let's just focus on that first part first. Do not be conformed to this world. This is hard. The first thing is to notice that I could be conformed to this world, and that I likely am conformed to this world. To see that this world is influencing me. And in order to see that, I've got to realize that there is evil in this world. That God is good, and this world has turned against him, and it's there's so much evil around, and then to see that I can't have that kind of pedestal thing where I'm just up here and all the world's down there and it's all evil and I can complain about all the evil in the world and I'm not like that. Instead, I need to realize that world is influencing me. That it's not just in the world, it's in me too. And it's so easy to be influenced by the world without even noticing it. Do you remember when you were a kid having the silly putty? Where you can, that thing, the little egg you open up and it's got this little tiny silly putty thing that's just kind of like this squishy clay kind of thing. And one of the fun things to do with that is to stick it on stuff. Like you stick your finger in it and then you can see your fingerprint in the silly putty. Or you stick it on a coin and then take it off and you see the coin on the imprint of the coin on the silly putty. The silly putty doesn't seem to have any shape of its own. It's just whatever it touches, it gets that shape from that. That's oftentimes the way we can be as well. And realizing that's a temptation, that we are so easily influenced by our surroundings. So how do we overcome this, and how do we help others to overcome it? Let's talk about a few passages to think about the challenges of this. I love the example of Joseph, just seeing how different he was from the world. Seeing this is what it really looks like to not be conformed to this world. Another one would be the book of Daniel. That's a great one for thinking about be different. Don't be like the world around you. Even if you're right in the midst of the world, how do you shine your light? The Israelites. What I like about, this is just, you can study all sorts of passages throughout the Old Testament and see the way that they were influenced to be like the world. To see the way that the world did pull them down, and see that as a warning. I think that's the last one. No, there's one more. Yeah. Sermon on the Mount. The thing I like about studying the Sermon on the Mount is no matter where you are in your life, it challenges you. And it helps us to see that my values are much more like the world than I thought. That really, I've still got a long ways to go to think like Christ. And so I think that's a really helpful way just to think through, okay, yes, I am being conformed more to the world than I realized. And, the last one, 1 Peter. That's a great one for it. It's a deeper study, but thinking about how Peter is describing us as being citizens of this world, but yet not. Yet at the same time, even though we're living here, he uses words like being a sojourner. He uses has a lot of these metaphors of being someone who doesn't really belong here. And he shows that in a lot of different relationships throughout the book, and really talks a lot about the persecution that you're going to feel as you're different from the world. So those are some passages. But the key with all of this, both for us to think about and for us to share with people around us, is being a Christian means being different. Now, being different involves thinking differently. And so that's what this next one is, this be transformed. He says here in the rest of verse 2, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Don't be conformed to this world, be transformed, be different, change who you are, be shaped into something that doesn't look anything like what this world has. So how do I do that? It's neat the way he describes it. So let's think through the phrasing here. He starts out by saying, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. It has to start with my mind. First, my mind is transformed, and then that will transform the way I live. Changing the way I'm thinking. Changing to where, rather than thinking like the world thinks, I'm thinking like God thinks. Particularly thinking in a way that values the things that God values. It takes us back to number one again. It's seeing God's mercy again. But it really shows how the morals that I live out are not going to be defined by this world, and they're also not going to be defined by here's what I think is right and here's what I think is wrong. It's going to be defined by, as he says here, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. God's will. Seeing what God wants. Now this is so key. to stress in any Bible study you're having with someone of, it doesn't matter what I think, it doesn't matter what you think, it doesn't matter what they think. All that matters is, what does God think? And focusing on, God, I want to know what you want so that I can be transformed to live and think differently. So what can we share to think in those sorts of terms? Here are some ideas. I love the book of James. It's great for thinking about this transformation, thinking about here's what I should do, here's what I shouldn't do. It's so practical, it's so simple, it challenges us. It's a lot like the Sermon on the Mount, but it takes the practical in a slightly different direction. Colossians is great. Once you get to those later chapters in Colossians, you get this just nice contrast of here's how you used to live, here's how you live now, do this, not that. It's just so clear and simple of just think and do it differently. Again, back to teachings of Jesus, those help us so much in this. All right, let's talk about, I think that was all those three things on there. So let's move on to the last point here. Number 5, use your gifts to serve others. This one, starting in verse 3, here's the longer section. It says, "For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. For as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function, so we, though many, are one body in Christ, and individually members one of another. Having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, in proportion to our faith. If service, in our serving. The one who teaches in his teaching. The one who exhorts in his exhortation. The one who contributes in his generosity. The one who leads with zeal. The one who does acts of mercy with cheerfulness." So all these first ones we could think of very individually. You could live these first 4 out even on a mountain somewhere by yourself. Like you could live in your own little hermitage thing and not be around anybody and feel like, okay, I'm not being like the world, I'm being transformed, I'm focusing on God. Until you get to number 5 and you realize, okay, that's not what it looks like. Number 5 is about a community, about gathering with other people who are serving God and serving them and helping them and growing together. Number 5 is what really gets us to the church. This is what the church is. This group of people serving each other, serving God together. And so that's why it's so crucial. I think there's a lot of times that we share the gospel with someone. You may have had this situation. You share the gospel with somebody, and they're baptized, and then you don't hardly ever see them again. And they got the whole salvation part down really well, but they missed the whole thing about like gather with God's people and serve with them. That's a crucial part of what the Christian life is. The Christian life is not an individual thing. It is a community thing. And so he starts it out with humility. Verse 3, he says, "The grace given to you, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought to think." It starts with humility. If I'm trying to live my Christian life by myself, it may be that I have a pride problem, that I'm really focused on me. Because it takes a lot of humility to think, okay, this isn't about me, it's about serving other people. When I start making arguments about, well, I can do it just fine on my own, that's probably going back to my pride again. I need others. Others need me. We need to serve each other. And so that's what he really gets into, how we've all been given these gifts. Use those gifts. Use those gifts not just for ourselves, for others, to serve other people. And the gift idea, it takes us back to number 1 again. It takes us back to, we've seen God's mercy. He's mercifully given us all this. What do we do with it? We use it to serve others. And so then he talks about all these different gifts. He lists off all these different things. And he describes things like serving and teaching and exhorting and zeal and everything and all this stuff. Use it. He's saying, use it to help other people. That's something all of us need to do, and it's something we need to share with everybody else as well. Okay, so let's see. What can we do to teach this to someone? Lots of things. I like Acts chapter 2. especially the end of that, when you see what the church looked like, how it was acting, it was great. It just is a great picture of that community aspect, and you see it all through the book of Acts. There are a lot of chapters that show this really well. Ephesians, especially the later half, we talked about the earlier half already. The later half is great for showing this unity idea, what the church should be and how important it is to be a church. 1 Thessalonians is a good book about Christians working together, and especially those early chapters. Really, I think it illustrates a lot of what the church is. All right, so let's think about these. To me, this is a great portrait of what a Christian is. It's not just a list of, I got that one, I did that one, okay, all right, I'm good. Because every one of these you can dive so deep into, and you can see the whole Bible is describing them. That there's just so much depth in it that all of us need to just keep growing and growing and growing in them. So I want to think about two things. One is, if we could each look at that and think of what area do I personally need to grow in. Just ask yourself that. Which one of these do you personally feel like you need to grow in? And it might be multiple ones, but where do you need to focus? So that's the first thing. Where can I focus? Where can I grow more? And then the second of, how can I share this with other people? Who can I talk to? Who can I share this with that I can help with this as well? Because God's been merciful to me, He's been merciful to you, and we need to use those gifts to serve other people. God's been so good to us. He's given us so much. Let's live lives that are living sacrifices for Him. Let's give ourselves fully to Him. And in doing that, let's not be like the world. Let's be transformed. Let's be different. And let's use all of those gifts that He blesses us with to serve each other, share that message with all those around us. If you're not a Christian this morning, then I hope you can come forward. You can give your life to Him as a living sacrifice this morning. If we can help you with that, then please come forward while we stand and while we sing.